Hi there, I'm Chris Chapwanya, and joining me today is President of ExxonMobil Guyana, Alistair Routledge. Alistair, how are you today?
Chris, very good, thank you. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. So good to be speaking with you once again. We're doing this recording at the Guyana Energy Conference and Supply Chain Expo. This is the fourth year running. How is it stacking up? How has things been going over the last 4 years, and what do you see that stands out this year?
Well, from a Guyana Energy Conference point of view, it just keeps growing, which I think is a real mirror of our business. Over the last 4 years, well, it's just over 4 years since first production of oil in the country. And since then, we've added 2 more projects, and the production now is 650,000 barrels per day. We surpassed 500 million barrels of cumulative production. So the growth in the conference is almost a mirror of the growth in our business.
In the industry itself. So I sat through your presentation today at the conference, and you provided some insights on the projects, the updates, how everything is progressing. Give us some highlights on that, and then we'll dive a bit deeper.
Well, sure. I mean, as I mentioned, we already have the 3 projects online and operating extremely well. Now, over the next 3 years, we're going to start up 3 more of these major global scale mega projects, the Yellowtail, Waru, and Whiptail projects. All 3 have been sanctioned, brings our cumulative investment in Guyana to around $55 billion of commitment, and will grow the production in the country to an excess of 1 million barrels per day in 2028.
So we're looking at 6 sanctioned projects, and there is line of sight on 2 more, number 8. You mentioned today long-tail FID, potentially that could come in 2026. So if you count or look back from 2015, Liza 1, May of this year is going to be 10 years since that first discovery. In 10 years, you've progressed 8 projects. That is pretty much close to 1 project per year. Tell us about this rapid pace of development and how you see it impacting Guyana, the country itself.
It is, to your point, very rapid, but it has taken the alignment of many companies with the government, a collaborative environment in order to make it possible. But then it's execution. And that's what ExxonMobil is very good at, is how do we align on the project, align with our contractors, and execute the projects safely, on time, on budget. So progress is great. The first 3 have been on budget, ahead of schedule, ahead of the budget schedule. The next 3 are all on what we would call a target schedule, so ahead of the most likely schedule because of all the good work that's been done today. And in reality, what we're seeing is one project is starting to enable the next. The development supply chain has become incredibly efficient in how we're delivering deep water projects here in Guyana. We're able to, everyone thinks of the FPSOs, these floating production, storage, and offloading facilities. Those are the visible part of the project. But below the surface of the sea, we have to install the subsea umbilicals, risers, and flow lines that we call SURF. And then even below the seabed, then we have to drill the wells. For each of those, there's even more of a manufacturing supply chain where we lay many, many flow lines, miles and miles of flow line for every project. We drill many of these projects in excess of 40 wells per project. And so it's more of a manufacturing process. And by being able to repeat these over multiple projects, we're achieving efficiencies and performance that nobody is seeing anywhere else in the world. And so it has immense value for all the investors, but of course for the country of Guyana.
And of course, there is a significant shore-based infrastructure that is supporting the offshore operations. I think over 7,000 Guyanese now support the oil and gas sector. There is the Local Content Act in place, as we know, and we see multiple companies being added to the supply chain. A 3rd company now supports fabrication of steel for the FPSOs. How do you see this progression? If you talk back to when the operation started here in 2015, when the first discovery was made, to now, how would you describe the evolution of local content development?
It's been a journey, like all parts, but for ExxonMobil, it's been critical from the beginning that we maximize the opportunity in the development of the resource in Guyana for the people of Guyana. And that starts in the development phase. It would be easy just to leverage existing supply chains elsewhere in the world, leverage the fact that Trinidad already has an oil and gas industry, and to use their infrastructure and the companies there. But in the long term, that is not going to be as efficient, nor does it deliver as much value to Guyana. So from the beginning, back in 2015, when we first realized we had a discovery in the Liza field that was going to be economic, we began this process of starting to find strategic investments that would enable this. Of course, the Guyana shore base, Gisby as we know it, is the first of those. You mentioned there are two. That Gisby was the first one. It enabled us to bring the whole drilling, well completion supply chain from Trinidad and base it here in Guyana. That meant moving all the materials, but also the companies that go to support that, and then the companies that support those companies. And so we've really established the full supply chain in Guyana for drilling and completing wells. That then became the foundation also, Gisby, for the production phase of operations. So Gisby has everything from the warehousing of spare parts through to our ability to supply fuel offshore, and then also to manage waste that comes back from offshore. And so that's an efficient supply chain also for the producing facilities.
So there's a lot of talk about gas development, and more so now as we're hearing this year. Exxon's VP for Deepwater, Hunter Farris, in his presentation this week alluded to that and the volume of gas potentially that could be developed. Tell us a bit about Exxon's support for what is clearly the government's and Guyana's vision to develop more gas resources.
This is going to be a collaborative effort. I mentioned earlier on, developing gas is a lot more complicated than developing the oil fields, this non-associated gas, because you have to understand the resource, what it takes to develop it, but then you also have to have a market. We all know that there isn't an established gas market in Guyana today. So we have to work on developing that. So that means, well, okay, what sort of demand off-takers could there be? Everything from, do we support the development of more bauxite, the conversion to alumina, other AI data centers, could there be more power generation, all sorts of potential uses of gas that can fuel the country and various industries for the future. This has to be a collaborative effort, though, between the government and its understanding of what the priorities are for the country in the way of developing different economic fronts in the country. But then what can the resource support? What's the timing of the gas? What are the volumes of gas that will be available from offshore? And what's the demand profile onshore? So this is going to be a very iterative, collaborative process over quite some time in order to reach a roadmap for development of the gas resource.
So you mentioned collaboration, and both you as well as the MD for Statsoli in his presentation also today alluded to that too, collaboration between potentially Guyana, Suriname to develop some of these resources. How do you see that potentially playing out?
Well, I often think it's hard enough to get a company and one government to agree to things. So when you put two governments in, it adds a degree of complexity. But I would say, from what I hear, and I've had many conversations also with Anand Jagasar from Statsoli, is there is a willingness to collaborate. There's a willingness to come to the table and talk about what's possible. And I think that is the most important starting point. From there, we can build upon that. We can look for other synergies, other ways to have a greater scale of development that will improve the overall efficiency of development, that may in fact enable some resource to be developed that wouldn't otherwise be developed. So early days in that discussion, but very pleased to hear the interest from Suriname as well as from the Guyana government to explore these opportunities and to think about the regional development, be it Suriname, Guyana, but also into northern Brazil, other countries in CARICOM. There is enough energy resource in Guyana to support more than just Guyana's needs.
So let's turn our attention to the resources offshore. We know that the publicly announced resources stand at about 11 billion oil equivalent barrels. And I know that there is extensive appraisal work that is ongoing. The question has long since been out there that we have not yet heard from Exxon an update on these resources. Tell us about the work that you are engaged in terms of determining commerciality and so on of what you found.
Yeah, and then that's where we're focused now. The number that's most important is how do we move estimated ultimate recover resource to developed resource, to proved and developed resource, which is much more meaningful. There's always a degree of a set of key assumptions about what the future may hold, what sort of developments, but moving those forward and materializing the development, getting to the final investment decision is what moves that resource into development. And we've now got to the point where with the projects that have been sanctioned, we're approaching 5 billion barrels of developed resource, which is a significant step forward for the country.
So when you look at the exploration program, I know that there's an ongoing 30-well campaign. Over the years, we've noticed that the number of discoveries, albeit even as they stand, as we've heard, record for the industry, but the announcements have dipped a bit in terms of commercial discoveries that you have made. In terms of your work plan over the next several years, you're still looking to push to really unearth and get to and have more commercial discoveries in hand. And so potentially beyond project number 8, we can look at a 9, 10, 11.
We certainly hope so. I mean, that's what we're working towards is, can we find additional plays? I mean, what we've established is a very good understanding of certain plays in the particularly central southeast portion of the block. As you're aware, we have drilled some other exploration wells, what we call rank exploration wells, trying to test different plays in other parts of the Stabroek block. And indeed, ExxonMobil's drilled in the Kanji and the Kaitour blocks too. But this is early days in a new frontier basin. And so even though we've had an immense amount of success, there's still a lot of unknowns across the basin that we have to work through. But from the wells that we've drilled, we've gathered a lot of information. We return back to the seismic, we reprocess, we relook at that seismic, and that's what gives us, we can be more selective as we go forward. What are the best opportunities where we still think there's potential?
So turning back to Longtail, as you mentioned, FID potentially next year, what kind of a development you're looking at with Longtail in terms of the gas to oil ratio? What is it looking like? What is it going to be?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned gas to oil ratio, because in oil developments, we always think gas to oil ratio. This, in fact, is a non-associated gas resource. So now we have to flip that. We talk about the condensate to gas ratio. And it's because primarily it's a gas-driven development, albeit the resource that we've been appraising in that particular area is very rich. It has a high condensate ratio to gas. And high enough indeed that we really see value in cycling gas back through the reservoir, so that not just what we would say in the industry, blowing down the reservoir, just producing, but we see value in pushing gas back into the reservoir once we've produced it. Because you take the condensate, you dry the gas a little bit in that process, you put it back in the reservoir, and then it picks up more. It actually dissolves some of the condensate as it goes back through the reservoir. So it's a little bit more of if you like, a washing machine. It's the gas is going back through the reservoir, picking up the condensate, and enabling us to increase the recovery of those valuable liquids to maximize the resource recovery in the country and maximize the value of the Longtail field developments.
So for these types of plays that you're looking at, we're looking at potentially different types of FPSOs to what you've had so far, which have been developed primarily to produce the oil resources?
Yes, it will be different. The hull will look the same, and if you're far enough away, it may not look too different. We'll have to look more closely. But the biggest difference is more gas compression and no water injection. So in all the oil fields, we use a combination of gas and water and what we call water alternating gas injection. to create a sort of piston of fluids that look a little bit and behave a little bit like oil and push the oil out of the reservoir to maximize recovery. In this gas condensate field, as I described, it's more cycling gas. Water has no value in the increased liquids recovery. So we'll substitute some of that water injection capacity for more gas compression. There'll be twice the sort of capacity of gas compression that we've installed on any of the previous FPSOs.
So there's a big difference, I think, in terms of oil production, gas production. They're all hydrocarbon resources. Sometimes people assume that it's all together. You can produce oil, gas, same infrastructure, same operations. Is that so, A? And B, what are some of the potential challenges that we can face, Guyana, as a gas producer, now that we're clearly pivoting towards that realm?
Well, the truth is every reservoir has different oil, gas, and other fluids in it. They're always unique. And that is why we go through an appraisal process and laboratory work and all the rest of it to then build up models, reservoir models, in order to figure out how best to develop that. And so each of the reservoirs that we're working on the Stabroek Block has its own mixture of liquids, whether it's, and the liquids can be different, condensates, volatile oils, oils that range from the sweet crudes of Liza to the slightly heavier yet still sweet in the Hammerhead field. So you have to understand that those hydrocarbon fluids, the gas, what proportion of gas do you have, and then how does the water work? Is there an active aquifer below the reservoir? How do we think water is going to perform, either from what's already in the rocks or from what we will inject in the future? So it's a complex part of, and it's where reservoir engineers really come into their own. Is they're kind of helping us to figure all of that out, and that steers us to what is the right sort of facility to have on the surface, the floating production, storage, offloading, in order to be able to optimize that development. As we turn to gas, the added complexity is storing gas, transporting gas is a lot more expensive per molecules, per unit of energy, than it is for hydrocarbon liquids like oil and condensate. So we have to connect all of that together and say, okay, what is that pipeline going to look like? Where will we store it, if there is any storage? Or what is the offtake market that is going to consume that? And can we match the production profile with the offtake profile? And that's the magic of building a gas value chain.
Lots to look forward to. And finally, Alistair, as I mentioned earlier, May is going to mark 10 years since Liza 1. This is the 10-year anniversary. What would you say has been Exxon's biggest accomplishment, biggest challenge, and what do you think collectively, in partnership with Guyana, we can look forward to as a key win over the next coming years?
Yeah, I have to say, while it's not the actual result, what I think has been the secret sauce in Guyana is that collaboration. The collaboration between the developers of the Stabroek Block, ExxonMobil, Hess and CNOOC, with the government. Government over the last 9 years since that first discovery. But also all of the supply companies, and that's the international companies, but especially the local companies that have embraced this opportunity, have taken risk, have invested their capital, and become part of this magic journey that we're on in Guyana. I don't think without bringing the power of that diversity, bringing everybody to the table and enabling them all to contribute, we could have achieved what we're achieving today, or set ourselves up for those opportunities and challenges that still lie in front of us.
Alistair Routledge, thank you.
Thank you.